Thanks, Stacia. And hello, everyone. I'm Amelia Dunton, Customer Success Manager here at Tessian. And I'm delighted to invite Karl Knowles to the virtual stage. Karl is Global Head of Cyber at international law firm HFW. And I can't wait to speak to him about how he's built defense in depth to combat advanced inbound attacks. So, Karl, let's just dive straight in. In your role as a cyber leader at HFW, what do you think companies should be aware of the most when it comes to email security, specifically in regards to inbound email attacks?
Well, Amelia, firstly, delighted to be here. I think one of the first things we need to consider, and that is email isn't going anywhere, despite the fact that everybody wants it to go somewhere. It does seem to be the main preference of communication for all different businesses and industry, not just in legal. But since the pandemic, there's been a huge spike in email threats, as we all know. In fact, Mimecast pushed out a report where they had detected an increase of 64% increase in email attacks as people move towards more hybrid environments. And what we've seen and what we continue to see are increased impersonation attacks. And these are on the rise. You have to see Microsoft, Google, Dropbox, they're all being impersonated on a daily basis. In fact, impersonation attacks account for nearly half of our email attacks that we receive. And then, of course, we've got the issues around domain spoofing and account takeovers, all becoming more sophisticated, more difficult to see, and certainly you need to be conscious at all times when you receive an email that you need to take a breath, you need to take a bit of time, and you have to look at it. But that's not always the case, and it's never as easy as just having that, taking that time, taking that moment, because as you know, the domain impersonations are very, very, very close, very realistic. Some of the emails are crafted better. So you need something else to help you with that.
No, thank you so much for that overview. So diving into inbound attacks specifically, I know you and I have spoken before in our review sessions about there being a vulnerability gap when relying solely on a SEG. Why is it so important for HFW to have Tessian Defender in addition to Mimecast?
Well, firstly, it's about evolving threats. And as we evolve our defenses, we've got to remember our adversaries are doing the same. Their TTPs are changing all of the time, so we need to be on our toes. And we've seen the examples of this, as I mentioned before, with the amount of impersonation attacks, where people email from other locations purporting to be from actually areas where they are registered. And this is where, we need to be warning our users. But we've also seen with new domains being spun up that actually, why shouldn't you be allowed to create a domain? If you know how to do one, you've got the technical know-how. It doesn't mean to say just because you're creating an email domain that you're going to use it for nefarious reasons. But the secure email gateway itself won't just put that domain on a blacklist, and nor should it. Because just because a domain's been spun up, it doesn't mean to say it's malicious. So that's where you need something like Defender to kick in, because the SEG isn't going to block it, because it's going to say, well, actually, just because you're new doesn't mean to say you're malicious. But then what Defender will do is it will just prompt you as you receive that email to say, hey, this is the first time your organization has seen this new domain. So it just acts as a bit of a pause. But this will also pick up when your normal sender's domains come from a different location, as I said before, with account takeovers. You can be communicating with an organization from Hong Kong, and you can have regular emails, maybe a dozen a day, and all of a sudden an email comes from that domain, but it's not in Hong Kong, it's in the Netherlands. So you need something to do that, because the secure email gateway isn't always going to pick that up. So you need a bit of a hey, do you realize that this email has come from a completely different location to where that domain normally sends its emails? But most importantly, it's about just-in-time alerts. With the secure email gateway, the email will be placed on hold, but then once you release it and it comes into your inbox, there are no other warnings. It's there. But what Defender can enable you to do is show the user a just-in-time alert of saying, hey, it might have got through the secure email gateway, but you need to look at this.
Yeah, such an important point on, the end user experience of that. So I was actually having quite a similar conversation with a customer earlier this week. So to actually detect, these kind of attacks, impersonation ones that you're mentioning that are slipping through, you need to detect the impersonation or actual social engineering techniques that are being employed by the attacker rather than simply the presence of a malicious URL or attachment. So what we found is that even with SEG impersonation rules, these are actually still published online. So as an attacker, all you really need to do is look at them, know how to avoid breaking them, and then you can slip through. Is this something that you've seen?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess the main trends are around sort of what we see in new senders, and you're looking at around 2,500 a month new senders, which is expected. And the main proportion of that is phishing, but we will see lookalike impersonations and burst attacks, and thankfully these are removed before any damage is done.
Yeah. So could you tell us a bit more about your existing security stack and how Tessian has helped complement or in some places displace redundant solutions?
Sure, and I like to use an analogy about a football team, which I'm gonna talk about, and I'm gonna say how Tessian fits into it. So what we need to do is
Brilliant.
we need to think about how a 11-player football team is set up. So, firstly, we have our strikers, and these are our go and get goals players, but actually they're not very good at defending, right? So they're your strikers. If you can liken them to your email provider, whether that's an on-prem or cloud-based provider, right? That particular element, not great at defending, so we'll always let that bit of spam through, right? So we'll always let that ball through. But then you've got the midfielders, and they're your SEGs, right? Such as your Mimecast or your ATP. And what they will do is they're a bit more defensive minded. They will stop most of that spam, right? But then the ball's going to get past. They'll not stop everything, so it will come to the defenders. And this is where Tessian comes in and helps complement that SEG. And what that does is that then catches all the emails that have slipped through the SEG, so the defenders are stopping it, right? And of course, behind the defenders, you've got the goalkeepers, and this is us. This is you and I. We are the last line of defence here, and it's most important to us to keep that clean sheet, right, and not let that ball cross the line, or not click that link, or not do anything with that email. So what Tessian does, it helps us as the goalkeepers to keep that clean sheet and to keep it out of the way. So that's how I liken it, and that's the way I put it into most simplistic terms when I'm describing how it works. And that is, you need that strength in depth. You need those people. You need those people in front of you as the goalkeeper to stop that ball coming into the net.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I really, really like that analogy. Thank you so much. So, what kind of inbound attacks are most concerning to you? Those ones that you really don't want to even be getting close to the net?
Yeah, all of them, if I'm honest. But account takeovers are
Yeah.
concerning. They're definitely on the rise, and they're really concerning because they're tricky to spot.
Mm.
We are getting attempts from fraudsters to trick our users, but luckily the ATO functionality in the Defender module highlights what those risks are, and it displays the appropriate warnings. And as I said before, the majority of these account takeovers are coming from different countries. So we're lucky in that it's able to pick it up, but it's also able to pick up when there's any unusual URLs within the body of the email, or if there's words in the email, let's just say requesting payment or invoice, and using other words which are based on, on nefarious, words which have been seen before. And, it's at this point, I think with the account takeover that us as a law firm can add value to our clients by informing them of this activity, or informing our suppliers, which helps us, look, or be seen in the light of being all over the email security side of things when we're assisting our clients, saying you do realize there's an account takeover, we're seeing emails, and just helping them with the process of setting up DMARC correctly at their end, and with their own email security. So I see this as much as an opportunity to assist our clients, our partners, our suppliers with security, as much as our own.
That's so interesting. And I think as well, threat indicators such as, a recipient being BCC'd, not even just from an unusual location as well. It's so important to have that information there for the user.
Mm-hmm.
I really like what you're talking about when you're saying, giving that protection back to suppliers. Particularly in the legal industry. I was at a conference a few weeks ago and speaking to a number of professionals there. They all really saw ATOs as sort of the missing link in their security stack. It's such an interesting point to be quite front of mind at the moment.
Yeah, and I think the more we can do to, communicate back and forth, just creates a stronger industry. It's, we should all work together as much as possible, not only within the legal sector, but cross-sector as well with our clients.
Yeah, such a brilliant point. So on that note, on, communicating with the community, what do you think security leaders need to rethink when it comes to defences based on this? What's your advice to them?
Well, firstly, we need to say that malicious emails aren't going anywhere. They're getting more and more sophisticated by the day. So we can't think that, one tool is going to perhaps fix all, maybe one day. But as it is at the moment, is that we've got to make sure that we have the technology to protect our people, but we also need to make sure that our users, as the goalkeepers, as I've referred to, the last line of defense, know what their responsibilities are as well. Right? Because, for me as a security leader, it's all well and good me showing them a warning. Tessian will show a warning if an account takeover is triggered, or it's a phishing email, or it's a newly observed domain, which is really good. But unless the user actually does something with that and reports that, or blocks it, then it doesn't actually mean too much. Because if they can continue to communicate with that domain, which is malicious, then you've got yourself a problem. It doesn't matter what technology. So the first thing is it's getting more sophisticated, but we need to work with our staff, our users, to make sure that they understand the important role that they play, and that they can't just rely on the technology. All right, the technology is there to support them, but it's not the be all and end all. We also can't expect just our users to spot these emails just with the naked eye. We've got to appreciate that they're working now in more hybrid environments using devices such as mobile telephones, iPads, laptops, computers, and each one of those will display things differently. And depending on where they're working, whether they're working in a train, a cafe, at home, or in the office, what we've got to consider is the factors that are going around them at that time, what their mood is, and what the stresses are going on at the time. And people that want to gain something from them know this, and they will prey on our weaknesses, and by using senses of urgency, by crafting words correctly. And when you're operating in such in such an environment where you've got multiple things to consider, and you're doing a lot of things at a time, this is when you need to take a step back and breathe, and just make sure you think before you click that link. And just going back to my final point, if security leaders would like to take my football team analogy away, of course they can. But the important thing about that analogy is the strength and depth approach, because you're never going to keep a clean sheet if you haven't got that approach. You haven't got that secure email gateway. You haven't got that machine learning at the top end of that, and then right the way back to the human layer, which is the goalkeeper, making it as easy as possible as you can for them to make the right decision at the right time.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Karl. I think, one of the aspects that I like so much about that analogy is that you actually include the end users on your team. So it's really, really brilliant to see that coming through as a human layer security aspect. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure hosting you here today. I'm going to be handing back to Stacia to take you through the next session. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you.